let's get going. Welcome back. I think that the happiest person the training camp has started is my wife. You know, in this coaching profession, it's kind of like cold turkey. You know, you go from the season where you're working, you know, over 100 hours, and then recruiting, you cut it down to about 80 hours, and then all of a sudden in the month of July, they see you all the time. And I think by the end of July, I think they're counting down the minutes before you go back to camp. So I'm happy to be back. Obviously, there'll be a lot of questions about personnel today. If the guys are on the roster, they're on the team. If the guys aren't on the roster, they're not on the team. So I will talk about the guys that are on the roster. I will not talk about the guys that are not on the roster. Simple enough? All right, so let's fire away because I'm sure you got a lot of questions.
What's the plan for what you guys will do with the offense during camp? I'm sure you got a lot of install done in the spring and that kind of thing. Do you have to start back at the beginning for all the newcomers? Or?
Well, one thing, the new NCAA rule that was invoked this year, where you could spend 2 hours a week with your players football-wise, was invaluable. Because for the only guys that are really behind are the guys that are just walking in the door right now. You know, guys that just walked in the door, you know, in the last couple of days. You know, everyone's here. The only two guys that are not physically here at this moment right now are Mosby and Ahambe. You know, Mosby's finished all his school. He's got one class that they have to finish grading. You know, a few assignments, and when they finish those assignments, you know, he'll have his AA degree and he'll be here. And Ahambe, they're just waiting for this deal with the NCAA and Prime Prep, and you know, it's not Ahambe's fault. You know, that's just what it is. And other than that, everyone's here. So I hate to disappoint all your stories out there about all the guys that aren't here, but they're all here, everybody. Oh, by the way, Skyler, I know that was another issue. Skyler got scoped a couple of weeks ago. It was just a cleanup of his leg. It was a 2 to 3 week recovery, so you know he might be able to go tomorrow. He might be a couple of days, but you know, he's not gone for the year. He's in the day-to-day. It was nothing major, but it was something we felt that we should clean up so that we don't have this issue during the season.
Charlie, those 2 hours that you're talking about during the summer, is it mostly just the mental film work and for somebody?
Well, that's all you were allowed to do. You know, you have 8 hours, so 6 hours was still strength and conditioning, but now you had to block it. Well, we did it 2 different ways. In June we did it one way. In July we did it a different way. So in June we went 2 days a week for an hour settings. And then in July, we went 1 day a week for a 2-hour setting. And the reason why we did that is because I tied in coaches' vacations. But coaches' vacations got cut short some this year because, you know, the only way you could be, you know, installing and playing catch-up with people mentally was to have position coaches here going over the information. But I thought it was a great rule. I think it helped especially the new guys, you know, play catch-up, because with everyone else, going back to the initial question about where we are with the offense, you know, when you're putting in an offense new, the springtime, you're just putting a foundation in anyway. You're really not spending much time game planning. You're not trying to figure out, well, how you're going to beat your own defense. You're just putting it in. You know, I think that now as we get into training camp, you know, we'll go about the first week and a half, you know, where it's offense against defense all the time. And then after about a week and a half, we'll start putting in some carded periods where it's, you know, we're going against a different offense or a different defense, so both sides of the ball get an opportunity to work on things that we don't currently do in practice.
How much do you think that helped Montel with that 2-hour study?
Well, I think that the whole thing with Montel was he won the job in the spring, but by us naming him at the end of the spring, it put him in a position where the summertime, you know, it was time for him to step up and start being a leader. And even though he won't, you know, take over for Harwell, who's like one of the perceived true leaders of the offense, he put himself in a leadership role where now he's much better suited to go handle and manage and run the team, because now the players don't just look at him as a player. He's the quarterback.
That was one of the things your guys in Dallas talked about, especially Harwell and Mundine. You know, the seniors, the veterans on offense, taking some of that leadership burden so it doesn't all fall on a sophomore quarterback. Is that something you talked with them about, or is that just
that was one of the main conversations we had, and we had that in the springtime, right after the spring game, saying, look, this is the way we're going. It was evident to everyone on the team who had won the quarterback job. I mean, there were, you know, if you didn't know who won it, then, you know, you weren't at practice. So with that being said, they needed to know that, you know, that put a bigger burden on, you know, Jameis Mundine and Nalu and Bourbon and Cox, in addition to Harwell and Tony and some of those guys. There were other guys. Pat Lewandowski did a nice job of becoming, you know, a bigger vocal leader. You know, we have a lot of older guys now that have played, so it's a little different. It's not leadership is not something you want to be faking, but it took some of the burden away from Montel and let him, you know, grow through the summertime.
And Charlie, how careful will you be with Tony for the next month or so going into the season?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that he's not inside as a running back on a regular basis, taking all those extra hits, I mean, we'll make sure that he doesn't get pounded on, you know, and we'll be fairly conservative with Tony, you know, because especially with the State of the Union, if you really care about your players, you don't want to be hypocritical about guys who have had concussions in their past. So we'll be cautious there, but he also has to get hit some, so that he knows that I can get hit and get up and go play the next play. So you have to make sure that there's at least enough contact in there where he's game ready come September 6th.
Justin McKay is at the top of the depth chart. Is that a nod to what he did in the spring, or anything since then?
And Justin McKay and Rod were very, very close. We just go by who performed the best. And at the beginning of the spring, you know, Rod was clearly ahead of Justin. By the end of the spring, it was very close, but Justin was playing better than Rod, so that's why we put him there. I mean, I think that the two deep that we threw out there, obviously everyone has noticed Nigel King now being on the roster by now. You know, when he became available, when, you know, he graduated last Friday from Maryland and asked for a release, and Coach Edsel released him to everyone but the schools in the Big Ten, similar to like our philosophy. And, you know, his high school coach had a relationship with Coach Keesaw, and we got into this mix. We checked with the coaches over there and got into this mix. And now when we throw out a two deep at wide receiver, now when you get Tony and Nigel, and when you got Nick and Trey, and you got Justin and Coleman, before you even get to the other guys, you know, you're putting 6 receivers out there that you feel can all play, can all win for you in the Big 12.
What kind of impact do you think Nigel can have?
I'll know more about him after I get to, you know, all I've done is watch him on tape, but this all happened fast now. I mean, you know, like all of a sudden the kid's on the street, you know, we had an opening, you know, we had, you know, one guy leave, and we had an opening, and what we felt was the perceived too deep. And when he came available, you know, when you could say a guy walking in, that's where you're going to start. You know, that a guy like that, he's looking for somewhere where he thinks he has a chance of playing. So, you know, he looks good on tape, and then, you know, but I prefer to just go by what we see now that we got him here.
Did you add anything that your receiving core didn't have?
Experience and production. I mean, guys produced. You know, guys made plays, scored touchdowns. I'm always. It'd be nice to have some receivers that are scoring some touchdowns.
Well, I'm being sarcastic.
What's your plan behind Montel? Is that an open battle at this point?
I'd say that right now, I'd say it's too close to call. I think that, you know, based off of experience, I think Michael would start off ahead of TJ. the thing is, TJ and Michael are not the same player. You know, they both have different strengths. You know, so we're just they'll battle it out. Hey, look, we're not gonna just sit there and say they're never competing for the first guy. But if we would not have named Montel the quarterback if it was too close to call. You know, so now that competition is going to be who's number 2. And right now, when we first go out there, it'll be Michael. But you know, both Michael and TJ will, you know, battle it out, and you know, and you still have Darlin in there in that mix too. But I'd say right now, the close race is between Michael and TJ.
That's different than obviously trying to find a starter or 2 guys battling for number 1. How important is it to settle that, you know, on a time?
You got plenty of time to do that. You're in no rush to do that. You know, they're both going to the game. You know, this isn't like, well, you're taking them or not taking them. They're going to the game. Doesn't make a difference where you're going. Those 3 guys are all going. So you got plenty of time. You know, what we have to do is, you know, build chemistry with the first guy. You know, with the players playing. That's what we have to do. It's, you know, I've been really big emphasis on chemistry. You know, in all parts of our organization, between the players, the coaches, and everything. And I think that with, you know, we you know, merry-go-rounds at quarterbacks don't exactly fire me up. I'd like to be able to settle in and, you know, start to get good at a few things and do them a lot.
You mentioned that it was evident that Montel won the starting job in the spring game. What did you see from him in the spring game as far as his improvements from the end of the last season?
The spring game was irrelevant. It was just another practice. The spring game means something to you. It doesn't really, it's just 1 of 15 practices to me. That's all it is. So where you go, the spring game just was 1 of the 15 practices. He was 60% in the game on a windy day. You know, ran the ball. You know, he can run the ball, make some plays with his feet, can bail us out of some situations. I mean, kid's got a lot of athleticism, and he's become more accurate as a thrower.
The biggest thing is the accuracy for him.
I think the biggest thing is, you know, not being nervous, because accuracy is never an issue when you watch him throw in practice. It's what's going to do when the pressure's on. You know, quarterback's totally different when people can actually hit you. You know, it's one thing when you know you're not going to get hit. You know, a lot of times you're way more accurate when you know that even if a guy has a free rush on you, you're not going to get hit. It's a totally different deal when you know they can smack you in the mouth, you know. So I think that he was better in just about every facet in the springtime.
Coach, in the spring, I know Ja'Cory Shepard had moved and Kevin Short was starting, but now Short's back to behind Shepard.
It's sort of similar to the conversation before when we were talking about Justin and Coleman. I mean, if you just went by the basis of the 15 practices, because that's what we do. We go back and, you know, watch them all over again and go through everything and say who actually played better. You know, that's another too close to call, you know. I mean, I could have put Orrs down there in those situations right there. It could be Ja'Cory or Kevin, but one guy's played for us and one guy hasn't played for us. So I just don't think it's fair to the guy who's played for a year to sit there and list him as a backup when the other guy didn't play. Just don't think it's fair.
How is this year going to make it different for you, stepping down from the offensive coordinator?
You know, I've spent a lot of time with that. I'm really looking forward to being the head coach. You know, I spend so much time, you know, just spending so much time on the offense and trying to find out, you know, how you could create something. You know, whether the efficiency is not even the point, just that you're spending, you know, 20 hours a day trying to figure out how to get it better, What I'm going to do is, you know, I'm going to spend some time sitting in the offensive room. I'll spend some time sitting in the defensive room, but really, I'm going to spend much more time on special teams. That's where I'm going to spend my time, because I want to let the coaches coach. So I'm not going to change the way we handled special teams as far as different guys having different facets, but I'm going to be in every special teams meeting, and I'm going to create the level of importance on special teams from today on. You know, every player will know that there's one special teams meeting the entire year I will not be here for, and that'll be the night of Corinth Square, because the special teams meeting is going to be why I'm there. Other than that, I'll be in every special teams meeting, because this way it gives me a bit. Special teams are one of the best ways to have your finger on the pulse of the entire team, because you're using both offensive and defensive guys. This way I can let the offensive coaches coach the offense, the defensive coaches coach the defense. You know, I can just be there as a sounding board for both Clint and for John, but more importantly on game days, besides, you know, critical decisions, my biggest thing is going to be much more involved in special teams, and I'll do that during the week as well.
Charlie, this is just kind of a philosophical question, but when you look at the offense at the college level, what do you think is more important, the scheme or the quarterback?
Oh, I would pick the quarterback 100 out of 100 times, no matter what scheme you have. You know, if you have a top line quarterback, you know. But that being said, okay, I think that you have to look at all your personnel. Not just your skill people. You have to look at your offensive line and your tight ends and your running backs and your wide receivers before you get to your quarterback. And really, the last couple of years, okay, the quarterback position has not been productive. But part of the reason it hasn't been productive is because all those other positions haven't been productive. So really, what bails you out in those situations? What bails you out is a guy who has some athleticism. That's what bails you out. Bails everyone else out too. And I think with Montel, we certainly have that guy who can bail us out of some problems.
You recruited him obviously when you were running your offense, but do you think he's more suited to run John's kind of spread system?
Well, see, spread is just an alignment. You know, it's not a mentality. It's an alignment. I mean, John likes to run the hell out of the ball. Okay, what we've done now is we've added an extra runner. You know, so with Montel, it fits John's scheme way better than Montel would fit mine, because in my scheme, okay, the quarterback is not a runner. The quarterback hands off to the running backs and gets the hell out of the way. That's what he ends up doing. In this scheme, he's another guy you have to defend.
Go ahead. You talked a lot about just letting John take care of the offense and run the show. You obviously just alluded to it as well. You also mentioned that sort of it was kind of a meshing of what you did before and what he does.
No, I didn't even go to the meetings.
Okay, so does that include terminology? I mean, is that all different?
Yeah, no, they've mixed the two of them, but not with my. You know, I had nothing to do with it. You know, I'm not saying it's them versus me. I'm just saying, look, if I go in there, if I hire him and then I'm in there all the time, then I'm defeating the whole purpose. You know, then everyone says, well, Weis can't help himself. Okay, that's why I hired the guy. I hired the guy to go ahead and do that. Now, there were things, rather than change terminology on things that we already had here, you know, things that were in his system that were in our system, there was no reason to change them.
Yeah, that's what I was
Okay, so I don't know what percentage of that was. You could ask John, he'll be in here. You could ask him that when he comes in here. All I know is, you know, it's his terminology, and some of the terminology is carryover because there were things that he was doing that we were already doing that we figured why change the name of what it is.
So you know, are you literate with all the terminology then? If you're sitting in a meeting, you know?
Yeah, I'm literate with the defense too. I'm just not gonna tell them what to call.
Charlie, you mentioned the pieces of the offense, you know, that all have to fit together. The offensive line. What's your assessment of that unit as far as making everything else work?
We are going to be very big. I mean, we're going to be very big. Now, I don't know right now, okay, how this is all going to play out, but I know when I looked in the hallway yesterday and saw Mazik and Devon Williams, you know, both pushing about 370, you know, there was no room to walk down the hallway next to those two guys. You know, and, you know, a lot of the people we go against every week, the one thing, they'd have a lot of big people out there, and we wouldn't. Okay, well, We got a lot more big people now than we've had. You can throw Junior in there. You know, he might be a freshman, but, you know, there's another guy that 350 would be being generous. He hasn't seen 350 in quite some time, let me just say that.
Charlie, in terms of production, do you go back and look at numbers and then extrapolate and say, hey, we've got to get to a certain point in terms of yardage points, that sort of thing?
Yeah, normally I do that. So we spend a lot of time on self-scout, but with the change of what you're doing offensively, let's start with that first of all. Really, you're just worrying about getting the foundation in and growing. Now, defensively, because it's not the first year of a system, you know, we're way further along as far as self-scout on that end, because now we can, you know, even just simple, how do we get pressure on the quarterback with rushing only 4 guys? Okay, are we just counting on one guy to do that? You know, there's a lot. These are the type of conversations that go on when the system is pretty much a carryover system that's being tweaked. Whereas offensively, where it's a new system, you're not worrying as much about the self-scout because you weren't doing that. You know, this is all new stuff. So what you want to do is put it in and figure out, you know, what gives you the best chance before you get into, you know, getting ready to play your opponents. Okay, when you're getting ready to play your opponents, or, you know, if you're playing against a team that plays all man, then you got to have a bunch of man beaters in there. You know, these are the things that you do in training camp anyway to go ahead and put yourself in position to go ahead and do that within John's system.
Charlie, how do you plan on replacing James Sims?
I'm pretty happy with our running back situation now. I mean, Brandon Bourbon and Taylor Cox have been, you know, waiting for their opportunity, and this man guy that's here, he didn't come here to sit behind him.
So will it be more of a running back like committee?
It'll be, let's see who the best guy is. I mean, I couldn't answer right now, but all I can say is before you even get to Corey Avery or putting Tony in the backfield a little bit, I mean, those 3 guys, I mean, there's a lot of people that would be very happy having those 3 guys as they're in competition for their number 1 running back. A lot of people.
Charlie mentioned, speaking of Avery, I know you've only been here a little bit, and obviously he's got a ways to go, but do you see him more as a running back, or could he potentially play in the receiving corps this year?
He's a natural running back is what he is. He might evolve to a Tony, but right now he's a natural running back. So that's where he'll be, you know, like, and, you know, he brings something to the table that the other 3 guys don't, because he's got giddy up, you know, so, you know, it's not going to shock me if he performs well, but, you know, he's walking in 4th on the depth chart, and that's not even including if we put Tony over there too. So you're walking in 4th slash 5th on the depth chart. You know, you got a ways to go before you can get yourself into that mix.
With the speed in general, I mean, you guys seem to have a lot more of that on both sides. I know that's something you've been working towards.
Well, let's start defensively. You know, the one thing when we're in this league, it didn't take long to figure out that if you don't have athleticism in this league, you don't have much of a chance. You really, if you don't have athleticism on defense, because they're going to spread you out and they're going to go fast, and you're going to have to be able to play in space. And that includes the defensive linemen. Now, you used to be able to play defensive linemen, just put big slugs in there. You can't do that anymore because you'll get gashed. People just expose you right there. And it used to be you could play with a middle linebacker that was 250-pound bruiser. You know, we have that Heaney guy who can run sideline to sideline. In this league, that's really what you need. You know, so, and, you know, we feel, you know, this is the best, obviously, we've felt about when we hand you out a roster, and you look at that roster, you could see, you know, most of you know the names. You know, this is the best we've felt by a wide margin about the talent we have here. Now, that being said, I mean, we've done very little to back it up from me right on down. So we'll see where it goes.
With the addition of King, does that affect how much you might use Tony at running back?
Well, what Tony does is gives you an opportunity to get into different formations that the team has to decide whether or not they're counting him, and are they counting him as a wide receiver or as a running back? For example, we could have Tony in the game and be in 2 back sets, or we could have 5 wide receivers out there, with him being one of the 5 wide receivers and being empty, but then we could be in any 3-by-1 or 2-by-2 formation with him being the back in the backfield. So, it forces teams to have to figure out how they're gonna designate him. Are they going to designate him as a full-time wide receiver, or are they going to designate him as sometimes a running back, sometimes a wide receiver? And that will give John, it'll be very apparent how they handle that, and then John can adjust accordingly.
Could you talk a little bit about T.J. Simke?
T.J. Simke probably, very few people know about T.J. Simke here. Okay, by the way, he's in the summertime, he's one of those bail bondsmen that goes and goes after those people. If I were going into a fight somewhere, if I were taking 5 players from this team to go with me, he'd be in that 5, for sure. Okay, but all he's done is work so hard that he's made everyone else better. Where do you ask when you talk to Bolton here days down the line, who made him improve the most in the summertime? The answer is going to be Simke, because all he did was push. I mean, he is the respect of both the coaches and the players. Don't be surprised to see him on the field.
Charlie, locally speaking, what did you like so much about Joe Dineen playing over at Free State?
Well, I mean, Joe Dineen has to decide whether or not he wants to be a DB or a linebacker, because he could very well eat himself into a linebacker. A couple of good home-cooked meals and he's going to be a linebacker. But the one thing, when I went and watched him play, I liked him on both sides of the ball, by the way. I liked him at quarterback as well, and he would be an emergency quarterback if I ever got to that point, just so you know. Okay, but with that being said, I mean, he was just a leader of their defense. I mean, he'd make plays all over the field, and he's one of those heir apparents that just like Cassius right now. Cassius might not be the best player we have as a secondary, but he's clearly the leader of the secondary. He's the guy who's on top of everything, and you could see Joe Dineen evolving into that role. And I think in the secondary, every good secondary has that guy, the glue. And I think that Joe Dineen has potential to be that glue. And throw one thing on top of it, I love the fact that he's local. I love the fact that he's homegrown, and that he gets to play in his hometown, and his family's 10 minutes away or 5 minutes away. I think that's great for him and great for us.
Coach, you've talked quite a bit about the need for athleticism in this league, but also looking at your depth chart, I see only 2 starters listed who are less than a junior. That's probably a long time since I've been able to say that around here. Talk about the effective maturity on what you want to get accomplished.
Well, I mean, we knew that there'd be risk reward. After we gutted the program, we knew there'd be risk reward when we went with a high volume of junior college players the next year. Way higher than you'd really want to be taken. Okay, but because we did that, even with the guys that aren't here anymore, the foundation of our team is all playing. I mean, if you just, for example, you look at the secondary. Okay, with the exception of Ja'Cory Shepherd, who was a receiver when I got here. He was a receiver at the time. Okay, Dexter, okay, came back from junior college. Cassius came from junior college. Isaiah came from junior college. Kevin Short came from junior college. I mean, now all of a sudden throw Ja'Cory in there with those guys right there before you even get to Greg Allen and those guys. Now all of a sudden you got yourself some guys that are athletes that can play, and that's why our team has expectations to be a lot better than most other people think.
Charlie, at this point in time, do you see the progress from when you first got here to right now before you start fall camp?
Well, I certainly see it on defense, and I see evidence of it on special teams. And I think that offensively, I think that what we're doing on offense gives us a better chance to win. And if I didn't think it gave us a better chance to win, we wouldn't have made the changes that we did. I think bringing John in, okay, has been a big plus. I think bringing Keesaw in, that was also a big plus. I think that those two guys have helped invaluably, with us changing, the things that we're going to do on offense.
I think an element is what John does with the run game, because you said there is this misconception about the spread, and people are saying it's a passing offense.
He likes to run first, which, that's one of the things I like the most when you have an athletic quarterback. See, the problem we had is the only time that we really ran the ball with the quarterback was when we ran it with Michael a couple years ago, but our passing game was so inefficient. You became so one-dimensional. You really weren't putting yourself in the best chance of winning. You're putting yourself in the best chance of controlling the ball. That's what you were doing. I think now, with John's mentality of wanting to run the ball first and having an athletic quarterback who can also throw it, now you got a chance. You got a legitimate chance. And like I said, I had this long conversation with a couple of my buddies that are coaches elsewhere, and they said, why did you do this? I said, because I think it gives us clearly the best chance of winning. And I believe that with what John's doing, I like the fact that it's a run-first mentality. There's other organizations, other schools that we play against that are going to throw it 70 times. Well, if we throw it 70 times, it means we're down by 50. I don't see us throwing it 70 times.
What ways is Kozart a better passer than Cummings, if he is?
More accurate. It's really what it comes down to. Michael's got a cannon for an arm. And I'm a big fan of Michael, and I think he's made drastic improvements. And Michael's working to get better, and fundamentally, he continues to work to get better on his accuracy. Okay, but we wouldn't be afraid to play Michael, and we think we could win with Michael in there. But Montel's just shown to be better in everything. Shown to be. That's why we named him the quarterback.
Coach, can you talk about your place kickers?
I think that it's really going to be interesting. When Matt made that field goal last year to win the game, that was both a blessing and a curse. Young guy, inexperienced, the whole school. You can see Saturday night on the town for him was probably a good night, wouldn't you think? Okay, but after that, his accuracy for the rest of the year, was really bad. Now, he has a pro leg, so he has every ability to be a frontline field goal kicker. Okay, his whole summer was spent on being more dependable and being more accurate. Now with John Duvek coming in, he's going to have his work cut out, because the one thing he is accurate. So let's see what he does when there's 50,000 people in the stadium, though, too. Once again, goes back to the quarterback not getting hit conversation before. The field goal kicker, when there's no one around, is a lot easier to kick field goals than, when there's a crowd there and the kick has added importance. But I think, I think it's clearly between those two guys. We have other guys that could do it, but I think it's going to come down to those two.
Can you talk about your 3 non-conference games?
Sure. What do you want?
Did you like the schedule? I mean, do you like the way it lies out for you?
I really don't worry about the schedule too much because the schedules are made like years and years in advance. You know, I think that you got to be respectful of everyone you're playing against. I mean, we've obviously done homework on every single team, and some teams you do different work than you do on other teams. You know, some teams have the same coordinators, some teams have new coordinators. You know, you got one team that that were playing early in the year. Their staff was in Toledo, so now you're watching Toledo tape. You know, so it all depends. But you know, I think that I love opening up with a game at home, and then we're going to go. You know, we're going to go down to Durham to play Duke, and I think that gives us a great opportunity. You know, because you know Duke's obviously a team that's on the uptick in the ACC. It's on the rise, and I think that gives us a great opportunity to put this road deal behind us. I mean, well, everyone's going to tell you have no chance. I don't think anyone in our locker room will think that way. Come home against Central Michigan, and then get ready for the Big 12 gauntlet, starting with Texas.
Couple seasons now playing against these Big 12 opponents, do you feel like you have a familiarity with what the systems are ran at the different programs and kind of maybe helps you guys prepare for it a little bit more? You don't have to devote so much time to, I don't know what this system is, I've never really prepared for that before?
Well, I mean, it depends on what school you're going against. For example, Texas, everything's new. That's our first game, everything's new. Different offense, different defense. Okay, same players, but, you know, everything is different. So you do a personnel study on them, and you actually study Louisville tape. You know, but then they'll have played 3 or 4 games before you play them, so you're going to use the foundation of your scout report is going to be based on games that haven't been played yet. Now, in other cases, you know, that's not the case. You know, sometimes you're playing against teams where the coordinators are the same, and you could settle in on here's what they were good at, here's what they weren't good at, here's how they got exploited. You know, how much time you spend on a team in an analysis in the offseason is directly related to, you know, what are they going to do on offense and defense so that you can prepare accordingly.
How long has Beckman been inside?
He played both guard and tackle in the spring. When we knew that once Devon Williams got here, we were going to create, you know, we were going to put one of those 2 guys at guard and one of those 2 guys at tackle. Okay, so Beckman will know both guard and tackle, but you know we felt that he's clearly better than the other guys enough to be in the 2 deep, and I want to get those 2 big guys getting as many reps to see where we are with them early in the year. And I'm talking about, you know, both Devon and Larry. I want to get them out there, but once again, they walked in there. I'm not putting them first.
Sure.
You know, that's not right either. You know, let's wait and see how it goes.
You talked about Lewandowski's vocal leadership and all that. Is that the biggest thing, or has he made strides elsewhere?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that based off of his mannerisms, you know, and being settled in tackle and how he you know picked it up in the summertime, and you know he's 290 plus. He's not like that 260 guy that ate himself to 290. Now he's settled in where he's at 2. Now he's not. You know, Larry's 370. You know, he's 290. So I mean, you can't hide the difference in the size. I mean, Larry, just to get around him takes some time. You know, so. But I think Pat is not, you know, has not gone through the summertime. Just wait for somebody to come else and move ahead of him. I don't think that's his game plan. And I think his game plan is for you're going to have to work really hard to move ahead of me.
That was the deal last year too, with Kiva and Kevin Young and those guys. Did maybe some of these guys that are still here, even younger guys that are still here, did they see that? Do you think they saw that and maybe that chipped or rubbed off on them?
It could have been. I never thought of it from that perspective. You know, that could be it. But I really didn't give it that much thought.
So So Charlie, with Semke, are you saying that if you just tell him the quarterback is jump bail, that will...
He'd be a good person. I think that's what his dad's company is. I think that's what they do. You know what I mean? So that's his summer job, you know, one of his summer jobs. But he's tough, he's strong. I mean, we met yesterday. Our meeting yesterday was on the strength and conditioning report from the summertime and our medical report from the summertime. So that's what we met with yesterday, both with Hosopple and with Murphy Grant, to go over everyone. And in the book, you know, they ranked the strongest at every position, and the strongest defensive lineman was Semke. You know, so that's you know, there's no phoniness there. That's based off of statistics. The best part of that meeting, I have to tell you, is Hosopple makes these books of before and after pictures of their bodies. Now, the bodies are still ugly now, mind you, but to watching where they were and where they've come, I mean, it's unbelievable. You look at some of these guys and just can't believe it's the same person. I mean, and that, you know, some of them don't look much different, and you know that's not a good thing when they don't look much different.
Does he show those pictures to the players? I mean, is that part of it?
Oh, yeah, he shows it to them. But more importantly, he gives me a copy of it where I could sit there and he wants to show me visual evidence of what a guy. I'll cite an example of a player that we haven't talked about. There's a guy by the name of Ronnie Davis who's a backup corner. I looked at the picture before and looked at the picture now. It doesn't look like the same player. I mean, he was 172. He's 190. I mean, doesn't even look like the same guy. I wouldn't know he was the same guy looking at his body. You know, watching a guy like Appa, who's, you know, no, let's not even go. Let's go with Nalu, who's starting at left guard. Okay, watching how his body has become more toned. And, you know, he was always a big guy, but a little bit sloppy. Well, you know, you just don't see the same anymore. You know, that's encouraging.
When you are recruiting 17, 18-year-old kids, is it difficult to look at them and look if their body can develop and put on weight, like you said, and trying to almost kind of do guesswork and see how much your body can put on weight-wise and tone up and things like that?
It's hard for me. It's not as hard for Hosopple. You know, guys who do this for 11, like linemen, I know that Parcells used to always look at a lineman's calves. If he had big calves, he was interested. If he didn't have big calves, he wasn't interested. Or you know, sometimes it would be a big ass. Seriously, you know, if a guy had a thin butt, he wasn't interested because they were only going to be so big. You know, so I mean, there are things, but you know, that's why I lean on Scott. You know, I trust Scott. When Scott says, I said, "What do you think of this kid?" And he says, "Well, he could be a 300-pounder." I'm trusting that, you know, a year or two with Hosopple, he's going to be a 300-pounder. You know, I also have the reverse question: when a guy's way overweight, can we get him down? And you know, he might say yes, or he might say no. If it's no, then, you know, that ship sails, we let it go.
Was Colin Spencer moved, or did he have some input there?
He had no input. Did he have an input? No. We're not running a democracy here, you know.
What went into the decision?
A better chance of getting on the field.
Okay.
Because he was not in the mix at wide receiver. You know, now, he's a height, weight, speed guy. You know, you go through the measurements in the summertime, he's always like through the roof. But we're trying to get him a chance to get onto the field. And, you know, as we looked at that position, see that nickel position in this league, better be somebody who can cover man-to-man. So where everyone wants the nickel to be, you know, some of the bigger guys, well, guess what? When they're matched up with those slot receivers, you know, now you got no chance.
Charlie, how much influence does John have on the offensive depth chart? Or is that all
John,
still your offense coordinator?
Everything.
Nothing comes from you in terms of
Oh,
depth chart?
I give my evaluation of every position, but I don't. I let the position coaches determine the depth chart. I mean, I don't determine the depth chart. You know, no, I might when they might not see a guy in the same light that I see a guy. I mean, let me use an example. Jacob Bragg. Okay. Now, right now, he's coming in. He's the third center. Okay, from what I watched in the off season, Jacob Bragg could contend. Now, would I like to redshirt a freshman offensive lineman? You betcha, but not if he could end up being a starter. I mean, so you have to see if he goes by, you know, both Joe and Keon before you get to that right there. But those are the type of things, you know, that, you know, I'd say, hey, let's make sure we give this guy a chance, see what it looks like. Because sometimes position coaches are too quick to want to cut down to the guys who are just going to be playing in the games. And I think that you have to have some patience for the first week and a half to 2 weeks of training camp to make sure you don't do that so that you don't miss anyone. Because you could miss somebody if you do that.
Charlie, if you could go back a little ways, when you first came in here, Ben Heaney was, he'd never started at linebacker before. He was kind of new to the position. When did you know that you had a frontline player?
By the end of the first year, you know, he's, first of all, his temperament is, you know, he's always the guy living on the edge, as you know. That's how he always played. But he's just grown so much, you know. He really has. He's grown so much as a person. You know, he's stepped up and he's said to the team things that, you know, that he's done wrong, that, you know, that he acknowledges, that, you know, that he wants to do better because it's all about, for him, about winning. He's really, more than anything else, has turned himself into a leader. You know, there's no doubt that there's a bunch of guys on defense that want to be like Heaney. And that's now a good thing. There was a time a couple of years ago that might not have been a good thing, you know. But now, you know, if they want to be like him, living on the edge, going 100% on every play, making plays, you know, then, you know, you got a chance, because now they don't want to be outdone by him. That's a good thing.
You compared him to Zach Thomas a few times. Is that?
Yeah, because Zach Thomas, look I played against Zach a whole bunch of times. Okay, and everyone said, yeah, he's a little too short, not big enough. And all he would do is go make every play and go to the Pro Bowl every year. Too short, not big enough. And what do they say about Edie? Too short, not big. Look at anyone who says he's not fast enough, they obviously don't watch the same games that I watch. I mean, because, you know, this guy is a legitimate frontline player, and I'm not reaching when I say that he might be as good as any defensive player in the league. Period. I'm not reaching when I'm saying that. I truly believe that. Look, I watched all the defensive guys every week. You know, and I would want Edie on my team.
Watson a freshman who would have a chance to...
Pardon?
Is Watson a freshman who would have a chance to work his way on the depth chart?
I'd say that I've been very encouraged with Watson. You know, I think that, you know, here's an odd couple relationship for you. Heaney has taken him under his wing. Seriously. You know, even in recruiting, they kind of hit it off. And I think that Kyron would like to end up being Heaney when Heaney's gone. And right now, based off of the conversation we just had with Rustin, you'd want that. You know, that's a good thing. 2 years ago, that might not have been a good thing. But I think that the kid's got a lot of athleticism. He's got a lot of drive. He's done everything the right way. Did well academically in the summertime. I'm very encouraged with Kyron.
You missed a track. You've been watching the change out of your window. That's one of the biggest changes that the average fan has done.
I mean, it really looks good. You know, I mean, I've watched all the things they had to do, you know, and I think that when Shane came to me and talked about the possibility of doing it, one of his biggest concerns was them not being able to have it done in time. And I actually had an experience that I could share with them, because my first year at Notre Dame, we did the same thing. We ripped up a field that had a track. And by the first week of August, it was ready to go. And I say, look, all I can tell you is I watched it happen, and I felt there's no way it was going to be ready. But, you know, now with all that extra turf, okay, you know, one of the biggest issues I have is daylight savings time when it gets dark early. Well, there's so much turf on that field. Do you know that Texas practices on their game field every day? Because so I could see, you know, everyone's worrying about all the spies that hang up on in the parking lot, right in that parking garage. Well, I mean, you could practice there every day you wanted to, because there's so much turf there now on that field. Besides the fact that it looks so much better cosmetically, and that's before they even put up this new, you know, metal fencing that they're going to put up. That, you know, I think that it's a great start. It really is. It's a great start. I think that it's going to be great for the football players, first of all, because the venue now has become much safer. And I think that visually for the fans, it's night and day different.
I think I read that Duke's the only BCS school that still has a track.
Didn't they take it out? I thought they were taking it out. If they didn't, I knew that they were doing that. I thought they were doing that last year. Did they take it out already, George? After this season, they're taking it out. So, you know, but I mean, I'm very happy. Look, I understand the history, the track history at Kansas, and you know, I think that you never want to slight that. But with Rock Chalk Park, you know, I think that now it became, the track no longer was needed, and it just made it a better football venue.
When you catch spies, do you just run them, or do you report them to their conference or your conference?
Actually, a lot of times it's fans for other teams. You know, it's not, you know, like coaches. You know, we've had it all the time, and you know, sometimes I just invite them into practice. You want to come in? Come on in. And then they don't know what to do. I said, "You want to watch the bet? Come on, come on." And then you know, you want in? Come on, I'll let you in. Or there will be other times somebody will be up there, and I'll look up and might use a little New Jersey vernacular. You know, I've been known to do that once or twice too. And it's amazing, they hear me when I do that. And they always disappear. You know, they're not there anymore.
Do they ever have phone cameras going?
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah. Yeah. You can't listen. You know, I mean, you got so many things to worry about that you can't spend a lot of time worrying about that. You really can't. You know, we have great practice fields. They happen to be in an area where people can, if they want to do that, they can do it. You know, not much you could do about it.
Taylor Cox hasn't played in a while, and he's had multiple injuries, or different injuries, I guess. Are you?
He's just on an extra stretching program. You know, everything with him is chronic groin, chronic ham. You know, where it doesn't get better. So he's on a big stretching program to try to minimize those things. He's not the only one, but you know, that's his real deal. He gets so tight, you know, because he's so muscular. He gets so tight, so he's on, you know, not that he wasn't on a stretching program, but now he's on, an extensive one. Anything else? All right, so John and Clint will come in here now, and they'll come right in here, and you can ask them whatever you want, and then. From what I understand, tomorrow it's going to be assistant coaches by request, right? So that means that there'll be at least one person here that asks for every assistant coach. but talks to about 2 of them. But if you have an assistant coach that you want to talk to, then, please get that information to Katie so Katie can run it by me so we could see if there's any reason to not do that. But I really can't imagine any reason to nix anyone yet. We haven't done anything yet, right, Katie? Right. Okay. And then I think that we follow that up with some defensive leaders and offensive leaders. So by that time, then we start to get to positions and things like that. Okay? All right, take care.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Coach.
John, what do you know about
Nigel's team? Excited to get him.
Obviously, we're excited that he's here. He coming from a program where they've had some success, and and he's had some. So excited to put him in the 2 deep and see how he's going to fit in for us, and see where he fits in for us. And we'll find out a lot more here over the next 28 practices.
How do you work a guy like that into the fold? I mean, obviously everything's going to be brand new to him.
Right.
And all these other guys have experienced some of it. I mean, just let him hit the ground running and see how he keeps up, or what's the plan?
Yeah, unless you know another way. When you're not here and you don't have the summer or the spring to start learning things, I will say this: he's an experienced kid. It's not like he's new to Division I college football, and he's not new to working. And he's not new to having to learn. So, we'll put him in and see where it goes and see how fast he adjusts. He won't have some of the other adjustment issues that people have, but and the other guys really have 15 days of spring practice ahead of him. Other than summer meetings.
Clint, you have a lot of proven guys on the defense. The defensive line would look to have more of the unproven. Can you talk about the individuals you're going to play? Obviously, both of them in each position. Coach was really raving about Simke, so specifically.
Yeah, on defense, a year ago we were able to gain a lot of experience at a lot of positions. Defensive line. Keon Stowers has played a lot of football for us and proven that he can perform. Tadarian Johnson played a lot for us, so there's a couple solid guys in there. We do have Ben Goodman in there who's played a lot of football for us. A little bit different role this year, but if you know Ben Goodman, he's one of our more productive, tougher guys on this team, good leadership. So you'll have a lot of faith in him. And then you're right, we got to come on. Some of those guys are some new faces like Bolton. Hasn't played for us yet. Simke will be in that mix. Tyler Holmes is in there, and then we have a few new guys coming in. So We hope to obviously get a solid 6 guys so we can, rotate guys in, keep them fresh. But, excited about all of them and think we have the pieces in there that we can make something happen with them.
Clint, when's the last time you've had this much speed on the defense?
You go back to that the Orange Bowl team. That was a pretty solid group across the board with the secondary of Chris Harris, Akeem, Stuckey, and JT. Those were 4 really solid DBs that all had a chance to all ended up in an NFL camp. And that linebacker that year, James Holt and Rivera could really run. So I think that would probably be for the skill, for outside the D line, probably the most comparable.
John, a lot of speed on offense too. I mean, I know that since Coach Weis got here, bringing more speed into the program has been something that's been really important. You have enough? Have you been able to assess what kind of role that speed can play?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like money. You don't know that you ever have enough. You just you keep wanting more. But I do think that that has been upgraded. That's something that this spring I didn't feel like we were too slow out there, couldn't compete and couldn't do some things. And so excited about that. And then obviously with some of the additions and see how some of the freshmen do as well.
John, Coach Weis mentioned how the spread offense isn't just a throw it around, it's very run-based with what you do. How important is what Montel can bring with the athleticism, the quarterback position, and being a running threat? How important is that to your offensive system moving forward this season?
I think if you look across the country, and Clint and I talk about this all the time, but regardless of the system you're in, when you have a quarterback that can keep plays alive and make plays with his feet, it's important. It puts a whole different strain on the defense. It forces them to defend the entire field, not just from him throwing the ball, but with what he can do with his feet as well. And I think, with where we are in the development of who we are as an offense, it's probably even more important right now. That you need guys with the ball in their hands that can erase mistakes of other players, and we feel like he'll have a chance to do that some.
Clint, is that an important part to defending the spread, is being able to identify the running threat that the other quarterback possesses?
Yeah, when you open up, your new opponent study, it really, as a defensive coach, always starts and probably finishes with the quarterback. What is his skill set? What are the things that he does well? And when it's a guy who can run, it creates issues in all aspects of what you do. If he's a scramble guy, how you're going to pass rush him. Those kind of guys can be scary. If he's a legitimate quarterback run threat, it opens up a whole, in our opinion, you always talk about gaps in football. Well, if the quarterback can run, that's an extra gap. And that's an extra guy you got to, put in the run fold to stop those kind of teams, which obviously if you're committing someplace, you're taking away someplace, and that's just kind of the numbers game of football. And so that QB is always a huge factor, and the guys who can truly be running threats and throw the ball well, those are difficult to defend.
And the people, and John, people think spread. Most fans say, oh, well, you're going to throw it 60, 70 times because you got 4 wide receivers, you're spreading the field. But from a defensive coordinator's standpoint in this league, a team like Baylor, what they like to do is spread you out and run. Or if you go out and you try to stop the run, they're going to throw it. So I mean, is that kind of what you see from this offense?
Yeah, that's what the spread mentality and the philosophy of the thing is. That just puts you in binds. You hit the nail on the head. Is the misnomer is that spread equals throwing the ball. Well, spread doesn't necessarily mean throwing the ball. The good spread teams I think are still in the 50-50, 60-40 range of run pass, and that. I say it just becomes a numbers deal. There's a certain amount of gaps in there, and unfortunately a limited number of defenders they allow us to put on the field. And when you put in somewhere, then obviously you're weak in different spots, and those are the conflicts that I believe offensive coaches in today's football are doing a great job of going with. It used to. I was talking to some older defensive coordinator guys I've known, and they're like, we used to just talk about fundamentals, tackle, be tough, all this and that. Well, obviously you have to still do those things, but where these guys on the offensive side of the ball is taking it is to where schemes and the schematics of football have evolved tremendously in the last, I think, since about 06, 07, that range, to where it's all about putting defenses in conflict and open space.
Is that what's fun?
Most of the time when you have the players to do it, yeah. And it is. I mean, that's what Clint said is, and a lot of these are conversations we've had, but you're trying to force a defense to number one, still play fundamental football. Two, keep them from trying to do too much because you're forcing them to defend the entire field. And then you're trying to find that, as he mentioned, the player in conflict, and do your best. Hopefully you have the matchups you need to take advantage of that player or that group of players, or that scheme. And my background, obviously growing up, is through option, and that doesn't, by no means are we going to line up and run 75 plays of option, but that philosophy of this is what we do. Okay, we can do it a lot of different ways, but this is what we do. Now you're going to stop it, and then what's our next step? And that's really kind of the mentality of what our spread offense has become.
How much does the pace of play fit into that? How quickly do you guys run go?
That's a really good question. I think that it's different for every team. I will say that 3 years ago, pace of play for what we were doing offensively wasn't a big deal because we needed to make sure what we were doing was right. I think that for other teams, some teams are trying to run as many plays in the game as they can possibly run with no regard at all for the other side of the ball. That won't be us. Clint and I will have fights if that's the case, I imagine. But, you certainly want to be able to take advantage of pace if you can. And so that'll be something that weekly we will game plan, and we'll look at who we are as well. Going really fast is good if you're pretty good. It's not really good if you're bad sometimes. Getting off the field isn't always the goal.
John, what has impressed you most about the receiving core you have here? It looks like a very deep receiving core on paper.
Yeah, I think what the biggest impression is that it's better than I thought. Okay, from when I first walked into the end of spring, I think Coach Keesaw has done a great job of developing those guys, and I think that there is a solid ability to put more than 3 or 4 players on the field. And so I'm excited about that. I think that they are as important in the passing game as the guy who's throwing the ball at times, because certainly they've got to help him. And so I think they give us the ability to do that, and those are probably the 2 biggest impressions I've gotten from them.
Clint, can you talk about the pace, fast pace, and we're trying to slow it down? They say maybe increasing injury risk when you have it so fast. How much advantage does it give to the offense?
It does. It forces guys to, think more quickly on their feet. It forces you to get the call in a hurry. It does limit your ability to substitute. If offensively they're not changing personnel, the game's not going to slow down, so you cannot substitute. So if people want to say that creates injuries, I've given it no thought whatsoever. I just know the rules of the game right now is you can't substitute, and then if you can't substitute, it obviously it forces a situation where you can get stuck with certain people on the field. And which sometimes is good or bad, depending on where that is. But it does. It be lying if you say it doesn't affect you. It's something you have to practice, something you have to prepare for. You have to have your system in place to get calls in that quickly. So it takes time when you play a tempo team, in your preparation. Which the more you prepare for, then the more your kids have to know, and that's on that whole thinking thing. So.
Kevin Short is taller than most cornerbacks. What is it about him as an athlete that enables him to play that position, and how high is his upside?
Kevin has a very high upside. He has a lot to learn in terms of truly how to be a technical a player, but his body type, he's a long, rangy DB, long arm guy, 6'1", 1-ish, body type, good body. Very smooth with his body movement, his change of direction, his speed. He can run, and he has good instincts. The game. He's one of them guys that the game, falls in place for him. He understands how to play, and is a little bit of a natural football player. So I'm very excited about where he could, develop in, or what he could develop into this fall.
I don't know how much you understood about it, but you knew you were going to have 3 NFL players on that over 17. Chris may be surprised a lot of us. Could you be sitting on a secondary that might eventually, end up with some guys that can play in the league?
Yeah, there's some guys in there with the talent to do it. You sitting here a year ago and looking at the bunch, and all the questions are, what are you going to do in the secondary? Because Dexter McDonald, Ja'Cory, Isaiah, and Cassius hadn't played. They'd all just gotten here, and they were the big question mark a year ago, and now a year later we're talking about those guys being matching probably one of the best secondaries in Kansas football history, and But they do have the talent to do it. I mean, Dexter McDonald, they're all physically, that body type that you need to have, and they, they're learning to play, and all of them have the ability to step up and become that kind of guy.
The ability to work with the guys in the summer for just those couple hours a week, not just you guys, but the entire staff. I mean, that help, especially you, Don. I mean,
well, sure. So, I mean, it's any time that you can sit down and watch film with your players and talk and without the pressure of a practice to prepare for or a game to prepare for, it really is true teaching time. And so there's no question that time is, and it makes sense. I mean, they're here, and we are at times, and so it certainly did help, at least from our side of the ball, without a question.
How much do you think it helped Montel to be able to spend that time with you?
I hope tremendously. I think that coming in and being able to know you're going into the summer as the starter, to be able to come in and sit down and ask questions from a different perspective with a level of certainty certainly helped him.
The stereotype might be that old school football coaches are pretty resistant to change or to giving up, ceding any amount of authority or decision making. Coach Weis has made pretty significant changes in the structure on his staff here, and Coach Campbell as well. Can you talk about how those things are going for you guys being placed in these positions? A little bit of an unusual structure perhaps in the program this year, and how that's working out so far?
You're into it.
Yeah, I mean we're a year into our transition. Obviously, switched things last spring and into last fall. Our side of the ball, it's been smooth. Coach Campo and the rest of our defensive coaches, we always, we're a team effort and work together to go with it. And when you're part of a program, part of a team, all those personal egos and all that stuff that goes out the window. You just do what's best for the kids and for the program and what's best to win, and that's what everyone's on board doing.
From my perspective, from the very first phone call with Coach Weis after he talked to Coach Bailiff and asked permission to talk to me, he said that he wanted to give up control of the offense, that he was ready to be a head coach and to spend his time being a head coach, and he wanted to hire somebody to come in and run the spread offense. And that is exactly what he has done, from my perspective. He's allowed me to do what we needed to do, and he sat back as a head coach and noticed some things and mentioned them and say, hey, what do you think about this? And most of them philosophically. We sit and talk about a lot. I mean, when you've got a guy who's won 4 Super Bowl rings, you want to learn something. And so, but he has allowed it. It's certainly our offensive staff's offense. It's not our offensive staff with an asterisk on it. It's been, from my perspective, exactly what I was told it was going to be and exactly what I was hoping it would be, and it's been very smooth.
John, when did you first begin running a spread, and how much adaptation has there been over the years?
Golly, we were in versions of the spread even back in 2005 and 6. I mean, we were still running some more ISO and things like that at the time, but not a ton. I mean, we were versions of the spread then, and obviously I think when in 2007 was the year we went completely to it with the philosophy of it, not just with spreading people out. As far as adaptations, a lot. I mean, I think that some of those adaptations are very small and they're week to week, and some of those are philosophical changes that are made. And they're major, and they're not made week to week. Those are made, in the off season and when you have time to sit down and study. But it's kind of like if you ask, the spread is just kind of the fun term that everybody likes right now. But if you said, hey, how did the wishbone adapt over time? Well, it's still the wishbone, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not the same one that they're running at Georgia Tech right now that they ran, at Oklahoma in the early '80s. So.
This is a philosophical question, but when you're looking at offenses, are you more concerned about scheme you're running or the guy that's playing quarterback for you?
The number one thing you're always concerned about is the guy playing quarterback for you. But I don't think you can look at him separately. I mean, if you've got a guy that you think is good enough to play, you better have a scheme that fits him. And so, I think that. But there's nothing that's going to drive an offense to success or to failure faster than a quarterback, and then followed quickly behind the offensive line.
How would you characterize your relationship with Montel? I mean, just the short time you've known him, have you guys, you know, that coach-quarterback relationship can be so huge. Have you guys taken strides there?
I feel like that's a little personal question, Matt. My relationships, huh? No, I mean, I think that it's a little different in the sense that I'm not his position coach.
Right, right.
But I do think that Montel has shown some signs this summer of taking over a leadership role as the quarterback. I think that he's a study of the game, and so that goes a long way. And he's a very personable guy. I mean, so it's easy to be able to build and talk in those situations.
Yeah, maybe the better way to ask is, have you been able to figure out those sort of things that kind of make him tick yet?
Well, since I haven't been able to coach him in the week of a game,
right.
It would be hard to say yes, but I do think I have a pretty good feel for how he does things, and I think he does for me as well.
John, 07, you had the offensive line. They didn't play mistake-free. They didn't make stupid mistakes. Can you talk about your ability to incorporate that and you know, get him to work as a team within a team, and maybe compare that with what you got now?
Yeah, I think, you know, the offensive line position is always, in my opinion, it is a little bit different than every other position in the sense that it's not just about having 5 good players. Certainly having 5 good players helps, but there's got to be a communication, there's got to be a gel, there's got to be a spoken and unspoken communication that goes on between those guys. It's all got to fit right. And you know, the 07 line, to say that we didn't make stupid mistakes, I could show you on paper that that's not true. But you know, I think that they had that, you know, whatever that short definition of that is that I just gave. And I think that it's inevitable. I mean, if you're going to be a good offense, you're going to have to be more than functional and pretty good up front. You know, and so that is what we're driving towards. I think what you take from either that line or any other line, or any other team for that matter, is what the players can take is look at it and say, hey, you know what, they weren't all Americans. You know, and having a guy back like Ryan Cantrell that was on that line, that knows how we did it and knows that he wasn't an All-American, to share that this is how we did it anyway, you know, I think that can be important, and that will be important to us this year.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Center position, you've got a junior college guy who hadn't played at this level, a redshirt freshman who came as a walk-on, and another true freshman. Are you extra concerned about center compared to the other spots?
Well, I'm pretty much extra concerned about a lot of positions right now. Certainly that center position is key. We do need a guy there that can communicate with both sides of the offensive line. But I do believe that he doesn't have to do that by himself. You know, I think that there can be 4 other guys on that offensive line that can help him with that communication. And so certainly we need to solidify that in a lot of other positions. But I think that we've got time to do that, and we've got the personnel to do that.
Clint, Michael Reynolds is the obvious proven pass rusher that you have on the roster. It would be big if you could have a second guy who can do that. Are there candidates for that as you look at the roster?
There are. You know, obviously getting pressure on the QB is a big thing. Michael Reynolds, I think, has a chance to have a pretty special year this year. We have to make sure we're taking advantage of that and giving him the opportunity to have that kind of year. And we've worked on developing other guys. You know, one guy that's come along is a guy backing him up, Victor Simmons, who was new to that position in the spring. But Victor's a really good athlete, has a good speed and burst, and he's a guy that made a lot of progress in the springtime with pass rush ability. And, you know, so we're always looking for guys that can do that. And then, you know, within our scheme, you know, other guys that can rush, you know, if we can find them, plugging them in there. But, of course, if you can, you know, as you know, if you can find 4 of those guys, and especially 2 coming off the edge that are really good at it, it changes third down tremendously. And so that is something that we're always hunting. Right now, you know, Michael and Victor probably are top 2, and see who else shows up and what they do.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.